Camille Preaker knew that going back to Wind Gap, Missouri was a bad idea. But when your editor tells you to jump, you jump. Especially when you're a reporter trying to salvage a mediocre career and a life that's barely held together by alcohol and long sleeves. Camille wore those long sleeves everywhere, even in the stifling, sticky heat of a southern summer, because her skin told a story she wasn't ready to share. Her body was a map of her own pain, covered in words she had carved into herself over the years. Words like wicked, nasty, and vanish. She was driving south to cover a nightmare. In her hometown, a place where old money sat uncomfortably next to meth labs and hog farms, one little girl had been strangled and thrown into a creek the previous summer. Now, another girl, 10-year-old Natalie Keene, was missing. The town was holding its breath, waiting for the worst, and Camille was driving straight back into the house she had spent her entire adult life trying to escape. The family Victorian home sat on a hill, looming over the town like a judgment. Inside lived Adora, Camille's mother, a woman as beautiful and cold as a porcelain doll who smelled of flowers and old money. Adora didn't welcome Camille with open arms. She welcomed her with a sigh, as if Camille's very presence was a smudge on her perfect life. Living with Adora was Camille's stepfather, Alan, a man who faded into the wallpaper, and Amma, the 13-year-old half-sister Camille barely knew. Amma was a creature of contradictions. In front of Adora, she was the perfect child, wearing frilly dresses and playing with her elaborate, expensive dollhouse, a replica of their own mansion. But the moment Adora looked away, Amma transformed. She was cruel, sexually precocious, and ruled the town's teenagers with a mixture of fear and adoration. She was the queen bee of Wind Gap, wild and dangerous, darting between innocence and malice so fast it made Camille dizzy. As Camille began digging into the murders, the heat of the town seemed to sweat out its secrets. Natalie Keene's body was found, propped up in an alley like a discarded toy. Like the first victim, she had been strangled. But there was a detail that turned the stomach of even the hardened police chief. The killer had pulled out the victim's teeth. Camille teamed up with Richard Willis, a detective from Kansas City who didn't belong in Wind Gap any more than she did. He was handsome and sharp, and despite her guarded nature, Camille found herself drawn to him. They were two outsiders looking into the darkness. But while Richard was looking for a man, a drifter, a stranger, Camille couldn't shake the feeling that this evil was homegrown. As she interviewed the grieving families, Camille felt the old itch on her skin. The urge to cut, to let the pain out, was screaming beneath her clothes. Being back in this house, with the ghost of her dead sister Marion, who had died mysteriously when they were children, was suffocating her. Adora was oppressive, constantly offering medicine and care that felt more like control. She seemed to thrive on sickness, doting on Amma and Camille only when they were weak or ill. The investigation dragged on, and the town grew paranoid. Fingers pointed at John Keene, the victim's brother, simply because he was strange and sad. Camille defended him, seeing a kindred spirit in his grief. She bonded with him, letting him see the scars beneath her clothes, a moment of raw vulnerability in a town of masks. But the real danger was inside the Victorian house on the hill. Camille began to notice patterns she had missed as a child. Adora's care was poison. Whenever Amma or Camille disobeyed or tried to leave, they got sick. Adora would appear with her blue homemade potions and sweet, milky drinks, nursing them back to a health she had stolen from them in the first place. It was Munchausen by proxy. Adora wasn't just a difficult mother. She was a monster who poisoned her children to keep them dependent and to feed her own need to be the saintly, suffering caretaker. Camille realized with horror that this was how Marion had died, slowly poisoned to death by the woman who was supposed to protect her. The truth broke open on a sweltering night. Camille, weak and sick from Adora's latest dose of medicine, realized she was being poisoned just as the police were closing in. Richard Willis entered the house and saw Camille, not just her sickness, but her scars. The revelation of her self-harm shocked him, breaking the fragile connection they had built. He looked at her with horror, not understanding that the scars were how she survived. But the police found the evidence they needed. They found the poison. They found the pliers used to extract the teeth of the murdered girls hidden in Adora's room. Adora was arrested. The town of Wind Gap was shattered. The perfect mother was the killer. It seemed the nightmare was finally over. Adora had killed Marion, and in her twisted delusion of caring for the local girls, she had killed Anne and Natalie too. With Adora in prison, Camille took custody of Amma. They moved back to Chicago, trying to build a life out of the wreckage. Camille felt a tentative hope. She was caring for her little sister, trying to be the mother neither of them ever had. Amma seemed to be adjusting, though she was clingy and demanded absolute attention. She was obsessed with her dollhouse, the one thing she had brought from Wind Gap. Months passed. Camille began to heal. But then, a new darkness crept in. One of Amma's new friends at school, a girl named Lily, went missing. She was found dead in a dumpster, strangled. A cold dread settled in Camille's stomach. The police in Chicago suspected nothing connected to Wind Gap, but Camille knew. She went into Amma's room while her sister was at school. She approached the dollhouse, that perfect replica of their house of horrors. She looked closely at the ivory floor of Adora's bedroom in the model. It wasn't ivory. The floor was made of teeth. Human teeth, 56. Tiny, pearly white teeth. Pulled from the mouths of Anne Nash, Natalie Keene, and now, Lily. The realization hit Camille with the force of a physical blow. It hadn't been Adora who killed the girls in Wind Gap. Adora had poisoned them. Yes, she had killed Marion. But the violence, the strangulation, the teeth, that was Amma. Amma hadn't killed for attention. She had killed because of attention. When Adora had turned her sickening, doting gaze on Anne and Natalie, Amma couldn't handle the jealousy. She was the favorite. She was the doll. She eliminated the competition. And when she killed Lily in Chicago, it was because Camille had liked the girl too much. Camille waited for the police. The silence of the apartment heavy with the weight of the truth. The little sister she had tried to save was a monster, created by a monster. The cycle of violence in the Preaker family hadn't ended. It had just changed hands. Camille was left alone with the knowledge that some wounds never heal, and some sharp objects are buried too deep to ever be removed.